Greetings, everyone. My name is Emmanuel, and I would like to welcome you to our program today. We are continuing with our series on rebuilding a new Africa through decentralization. Our topic today is prayer is important, but prayer alone will not, transform and develop our countries. You see, the Bible says that men ought to pray always. So as Christians, we have to pray for our nations. Second Chronicles chapter 7 verse 14 says that if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face, I will hear their prayers and I will forgive them and I will heal their land. Jeremiah chapter 29 verse 7 says that the prophet was telling the Jewish people that in captivity they should seek the peace of the land wherein they have been held captive. That when there is peace in the land, they will also enjoy, the blessings of that peace. We also remember the great story of the children of Israel in captivity in Egypt, how they prayed and they cried unto God, and God heard their prayers, and God sent Moses to deliver them from their captivity in Egypt. You see, God is not only interested in saving us, but God is also interested in prospering our nations. But prayer alone cannot, or prayer alone will not develop and transform our nations. We have to pray, but in addition to praying for our different nations, there are other things that we have to do. For example, we have to elect, ethical leaders in government. That is why, Christians have to get involved in politics. When there is an election, as a Christian, you have to vote. You have to, vote. And when we elect ethical leaders in government, these ethical leaders will be able to implement good policies that will bring economic development in our nations. We have to elect ethical leaders who have, a good vision for our different nations, ethical leaders who are compassionate, ethical leaders who are, who have managerial skills. You see, these leaders must be able to wisely manage the scarce resources that God has given to our different nations. One of the reasons why most African countries are poor and underdeveloped is that our leaders are not able to manage the resources that are in our nations. Most of them, instead of trying to manage the resources so that everybody, all the citizens will benefit, they are instead, trying to siphon public funds. You see, most people think that when they are in government, they are there to steal public funds. That is the mentality that some of our leaders have, but that is not good for the development of our nations. That is why, as Christians, we have to participate in elections in our countries in order to elect, ethical leaders, leaders who have compassion, leaders who want to serve the people, leaders who want the welfare of the general public, leaders who are seeking for the welfare of their citizens. Those are the kinds of leaders that we must elect during elections. The second factor that can promote national development and prosperity is for the elected leaders to institute political, economic, and social systems that will promote national development and economic prosperity in our nations. You see, a political system that will encourage freedom of speech, a political system that will encourage national development, and an economic system that will encourage investment, that will make it easy for business people to come to our nations and invest. Because when business people invest in our nations, they will create jobs. And when they create jobs, many of our youths will be employed. We also have to have, social systems that are able to take care of the poor and the needy in our midst, because in Africa we have a lot of people who are suffering. So the government needs to create a system, a social system, to take care of the poor and the needy and the orphans and the fatherless in our communities and in our nations. Now, the third factor that can spur economic development is when African countries have, good constitutions that protect the human rights of all citizens, and constitutions that limit the power of public officials, because sometimes public officials, they abuse their constitutional powers. So we need to come up with good constitutions, effective constitutions that protect, the human rights of all citizens, constitutions that, endow citizens with the freedom of speech, freedom to petition their government, freedom of assembly, freedom to peacefully protest, the bad things that the government is doing, the bad economic policies, the bad political policies that the government is implementing. If the citizens don't like those policies, the citizens must have a way, of expressing their grievances against the state. So the state must protect, the rights of citizens to assemble and to petition the government. And our constitutions must also limit the powers of those who are in office, so that they will not, abuse their constitutional power. Now, the other factor for national development is that the church must also continue to teach kingdom values like tolerance, like patience, like hard work, like peace, like equality, like liberty, like freedom. These are, ideas that can help, to bring national development, national cohesion, national, prosperity in our different nations. You see, the church is the pillar and ground and foundation of truth. So the church must be able to teach kingdom values that will be able to affect the culture in our communities and in our nations. And when, our culture is influenced with kingdom principles like hard work, like patience, like peace, like equality, like liberty, like freedom, our nations will prosper. In addition to that, the churches must promote righteousness and justice in our communities and in our nations. You see, the church is the voice of the voiceless. The church is the defender of the defenseless. The church, is the conscience of our nations. The church must stand up to injustice. The church must speak, truth to power. The church is like the father to the fatherless. The church is like the eyes to the blind. The church is like the feet to the lame. The church must stand up to protect, the poor and the needy. The church must stand up for the oppressed. The church must stand up for the marginalized in our communities and in our nations. And the final factor that can usher economic development and prosperity in our nation is when we have peace and political stability in our nations. You see, when we don't have peace and political stability in our nation, it discourages, investors to come to our countries in Africa to invest. And when we don't have foreign direct investment coming in from business people around the world, our nations will not prosper. Unfortunately, many African countries have adopted a centralized system of government which encourages conflicts, which encourages, tribal groups, intra-state conflict, and that discourages investment. For example, in 2019, the ease of doing business, rankings, Israel was ranked number 35. While many African countries like Cameroon, Cameroon was ranked 167, Nigeria was ranked 131, Ghana was ranked 118, South Sudan was ranked 85, Liberia was ranked 170 or 72, Kenya was ranked 56, South Africa was ranked 84. Who would like to do business in African countries when they can invest in other countries where it is very easy for people to do business? So many people will not want to do business in most African countries because it is difficult to do business, because there is instability, political instability, as a result of the form of government that we have in Africa. The centralized system of government encourages conflict. The centralized system of government encourages corruption. The centralized system of government encourages inefficiency. That is why most African countries, have those rankings that I just mentioned, and those rankings, they discourage investors from coming to our countries. So my dear brothers and sisters, prayer is very important, but prayer alone will not develop our nations. In addition to prayer, we must elect ethical leaders in government. These leaders must institute effective political, economic, and social programs that will promote national development. In addition to that, our countries must have good constitutions, constitutions that protect the rights of all citizens, and constitutions that limit the power of elected officials. Now, the church also must preach, kingdom values to transform the culture, to transform our communities. The church must also promote righteousness and justice in our communities and nations. And finally, African countries must have peace and political stability in order for investors to invest in our nations. And when there is foreign direct investment in our nations, that will create jobs, that will employ a lot of youths in our nations. And all of these factors, prayer, electing ethical leaders, promoting righteousness and justice, and a good constitution, all of these factors will now help to develop our nation. All these factors will now help to promote economic development and national prosperity in our nations. Thank you so much for watching this video. We are going to continue next time. Until then, bye-bye.